Hi there. So in today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about the IB Diploma English A Language and Literature Individual Oral, which is a new assessment, first being assessed in 2021. In one of my earlier videos, I go through the planning and the structure about what IB needs for this assessment. In this particular video, I decided to actually do the oral myself, just trying to experience it and see the pitfalls and the ways to do it. So I'm going to run through the planning stage fairly briefly. You can stop and pause if you want to look at it in more detail, and then I'll move on to an actual transcript of a presentation that I would give. Do bear in mind, for the real oral, you're not allowed to do an actual full-on transcript or script that you read from, but you are allowed to do notes, which I'll show you an example of mine in a moment. So to begin with, these are the texts that I chose. This is from Dove's Campaign for Real Beauty from the UK. It's a very short non-literary text here, so I need at least 10 similar examples to make a body of work to count. So you can see some of the planning I did on here. Moving on, we've got the literary text, which is from Carol Ann Duffy's poem Medusa. Again, this is quite short, so I need a body of work. I need about or several more poems to make this one complete text. We used about 15 in class, I think. So I'll scroll through here just so you can see my notes, rough idea of what it's about, and then I started thinking about connecting these to one particular global issue. So I took all these notes, turned them into this. Apologies for my handwriting. The representation of female beauty in society is the main thread really that connects these two texts, but in very different ways, which I thought was particularly interesting. The treatment is very different. So that was my initial planning, all a bit jumbled, all a bit messy, but that's okay. And then I moved on to a Word document, started doing it on paper, and then pulled all these ideas together to make it a little bit more cohesive. You can see I've got the global issue in the middle, it's the central thread, and then some other notes as we go down. Okay, so it's starting to take a little bit more shape now, talking about purpose and tone and language for both of them, so that should give me a balance of something to contrast later on. And then once I did that, I've got a document I give to my students which essentially forces them to meet what IB requires from the assessment. So it forces them to talk about the global issue, representation of female beauty in Western culture. Why is it important? Why is it transnational? And more importantly here at the end, talking about the content and the form. These are specific things that IB has asked for, so I'm making sure my students address those as we go along. Now, once I've got that, now it's starting to take a lot better shape. Now I can actually move on to what's called the individual oral outline. The outline is up to 10 points, bullet points really, that I can bring into my oral to give me a particular structure. So these are the points that I've made, not super long because these do get submitted to IB, so I don't want to write that whole script down. These are really triggers or prompts to make me think about what I want to say in each section as I work my way through the presentation. So there they are. And again, feel free to pause if I'm scrolling too fast. You can come back to them. All right, so moving down then, there's one more little bit of planning there. Moving down, this is the actual transcript, so I'll go through this and just pause as I explain what I'm doing in each section. Okay, my talk today will focus on an important global issue, the representation of female beauty in society. The hashtag #MeToo movement and a rise in feminist ideals has prompted extra awareness about women's rights. Traditional notions of beauty are being challenged, and this prompted me to consider these two texts. So initially to kick off with the global issue, that's front and centre. My first text is Carol Ann Duffy's Medusa, taken from her collection, The World's Wife, and a non-literary text, an advertisement from Dove's Campaign for Real Beauty. Both these texts focus closely on how female beauty is represented in society, but in very different ways. One similarity, though, is that they both challenge the reader to see beauty in a broader sense and not be restrained by societal ideals and stereotypes. So now I've brought in my two texts immediately in the introduction, and also come in with a kind of a thesis, or start to building towards a thesis or a claim about how the global issue is treated. Now next I want to do some signposting, which is basically just like a trailer for the rest of the presentation. Where's it going to go? In this presentation I will first discuss the purpose and tone of the literary and then non-literary texts. This will be followed by a close reading of both texts and then an analysis of their conclusions. My thesis, make it really clear that this is where you're going, is that both texts deal with female beauty but in significantly different ways. One shows us the unfair way in which men cast aside older women in favour of younger, more beautiful ones. The other presents an alternative version of beauty that seems to be more internalised and less concerned with relationships with men. So global issue is the thing that connects them there, but I'm presenting an idea that the treatment is actually quite different. Okay, so again, more signposting to begin with. I'm going to get into the literary text first. To begin with, we'll explore Medusa. The purpose of the poem is to reflect the speaker's sorrow and then rage through a dramatic monologue as she finds herself abandoned by her lover or husband. The speaker is consumed with fury following her husband's cheating, which seems to have occurred once the wife has aged and lost her conventional beauty or attractiveness. As a result, there's a growing anger which can be seen in the development of the nouns, a suspicion, a doubt, a jealousy, and later in the verbs when the speaker says she glanced, then looked, and finally stared at objects that she's turned to stone. We sense her growing frustration at being abandoned as she leaves behind traditional forms of beauty, evident in the alliterative line, "My bride's breath soured stank in the grey bags of my lungs." She was once a bride in white, connoting her purity, but this has now changed to being yellow-fanged, which connotes decay and ageing. Duffy alludes to the story of Medusa, who could turn her victims to stone by looking at them. When she talks about bullet tears in my eyes, the connotations of violence is clear. Bullets in her own eyes can be used to kill. She suggests that men will inevitably look for more beautiful options when she says, in a resigned tone, "I know you'll go, betray me, stray from home." So again, quite close reading here, but all of it referring back to the global issue, so it's all tied in together. The poem then employs stark imagery to describe the power that derives from her anger. We see how the birds and the bees, a clear reference to her crumbling sex life, are turned to stone. The harsh sounds of pebbles spattered and shattered reflect her anger, while the cat rolling in a heap seems to symbolise her new, lonely life. The poem ends in a pleading, plaintive way as the speaker reminds her love repeatedly of your girls, and then refers directly to her former beauty as she asks, rhetorically, wasn't I beautiful, wasn't I fragrant and young? The tone of the poem is at first regretful, but soon turns to anger as the speaker resents how society treats women who lose their beauty. Duffy takes this to an extreme by creating a persona based on a classically horrific figure. But then, as Andrew Dworkin claimed, women are often portrayed as the root of all evil, from Eve in the Garden of Eden to the jealous witches and stepmothers of fairy tales. So a little bit of outside research there to back up my points. By the end of the poem, the tone can be read as being someone out for revenge, as the speaker uses an imperative to demand, "Look at me now." This at first appears to remind us of the older state she is in now. However, it could be seen as a final plea to her husband. Given that she is Medusa, however, it can be read as a threat, as by looking directly at her, she will gain her revenge and he will be turned to stone. The Dove text also appeals to the intended reader to see beauty in a different light. So you have transitioned there from the two texts, but connecting them through the global issue. We see the older model smiling and are then immediately presented with a false dilemma. Is she grey or gorgeous? The voting style boxes suggest there's only two options, which reflects the overly simplified view of female beauty prevalent in society. Again, direct reference back to the global issue. The rhetorical question, why can't more women feel glad to be grey, alludes to the LGBT slogan of glad to be gay, which gives the text a light, appealing tone. The imperative that follows, join the beauty debate, is a call to action that assumes there is a debate taking place. The link to the company's website clearly suggests the reader should now go there to give their own views. Looking at the image itself, again, signposting that I'm now going to look at the visual side of it. It's shot slightly from below, giving the model an empowering look. She's smiling confidently while her grey hair contrasts with the black, non-imposing clothing she wears. As a result, the tone is uplifting and upbeat, and the ethical message from Dove suggests the reader should have a similar attitude towards unconventional forms of female beauty. The form of both poems is important. Again, we talked about form earlier. Ivy wants you to talk about this, so making it clear that's what I'm going to do here. Duffy's poem is irregular and disjointed. This form reflects the anger and resentment felt by the speaker. The enjambments also reflect these emotions. Duffy uses half rhymes, terrified eyes, and internal rhymes, I know you'll go, to give the poem some unity, which does give the poem some unity, however. Structurally, the stanzas are similar, apart from the single line final one, which makes its message all the more stark. Dove's advert is also irregular, so kind of comparing the two forms here, in the sense that it goes against the normal tropes of beauty advertising. By using older models, it's directly challenging the usual younger models used, and by doing so it suggests it's taking an ethical stance against the representation of female beauty. As a result of both texts, we can see how female beauty is often represented in a simplistic, narrow way. The result in Duffy's case is a man who buys into this desire for someone beautiful and abandons someone who truly loved him. With Dove, we see how beauty can have many faces and shouldn't be limited to one narrow definition. This stance can also be seen in similar adverts in the same campaign. Dove uses older models in other adverts. One asks if the woman is wrinkled or wonderful, while it also has images of imperfections, one questioning if blemishes are beauty spots or ugly spots. In Duffy's other poems, especially Havisham, she again portrays a female victim dealing with the loss of a love, who blames men's frailties. Other poems, however, represent women in a far more powerful light. Mrs. Aesop has the mocking line, by Christ he could bore for purgatory, while in Anne Hathaway, Duffy allows the speaker to take ownership of her more famous husband in an affectionate manner. So this section is important because I'm branching out and referring to other literary texts in the same passage that I've taught, the same area that I've studied, which is important. In conclusion, then, we can see how both texts allow us to learn something about the global issue of female beauty and representation, so going back to the global issue here. Both texts challenge the concept of traditional beauty and the possible misogynistic values placed on it. Medusa angrily demands attention from her unfaithful husband, who is interested in younger forms of beauty, while Dove highlights imperfections and suggests they too can be beautiful. The texts themselves arrive at very different conclusions. Duffy's speaker furiously turns everything to grey stone, reflecting her lost beauty and passions. Dove directly offers more of an olive branch, embracing the grey of older beauty and suggesting it can be just as stunning. So save a nice little play, a pun on the grey, right to the very end there to leave, hopefully, with a strong impression. So there we go. That's a rough idea of how a oral could look. Hope that's been useful, and best of luck with planning your own presentations. Thank you.